In this video, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of buying an apartment in a condo building. At the end of this video, you will know what exactly to expect from a condominium ownership so you can make an informed decision. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. If this is the first time you're watching me, my name is Sargis. I'm a licensed real estate agent based here in New York City, and this channel is all about New York City real estate. Since New York City residential real estate market is full of co-ops, which makes it unique and separates it from the rest of the country, if you're in New York City and you're thinking to buy a condo, your alternative choice for the most part would be to buy an apartment in a co-op building. That's why the list of the pros and cons in this video will be based on the comparison between condos and co-ops. If you're watching this video from somewhere else where you rarely see any co-op buildings, this list of pros and cons will be different for you. Because in other cities and states, people mostly are debating between buying a condo versus a single family residence. These are two totally different styles of living, and pros and cons in this case are analyzed from a different perspective. Here in New York City, the majority of buyers are debating between buying a condo versus a co-op. That's why this video will be pros and cons of a condo when comparing it to a co-op. But you can still continue watching this video even if you're in another state. Who knows, maybe one day you'll decide to move to New York City. Since I'm going to be comparing condos to co-ops, if you're not quite familiar with co-ops or you've never heard the term co-op, I already made a few videos about co-ops in this channel, so feel free to watch them as well. If you want everything in one video, this is it. So at this point, I'm assuming you know exactly what is a condo and you know exactly what is a co-op and how the ownership is structured in both. Before we take a look at the pros and cons, it is important to mention that there is no one-size-fits-all approach, and pros and cons are different for every situation. Your situation and your priorities can be different from someone else's, and therefore something in a pro list can be an advantage for you, but the same thing can be a disadvantage for someone else. So keep watching this video and it will make more sense to you when we take a look at some examples. Let's start with the most obvious pro, which is the fact that there is no financial requirements. Some condos might have a minimum down payment requirement, which mostly is 10%. Other than that, condos don't qualify the buyers. There is no post-closing liquidity and no debt to income ratio requirement. But keep in mind that we're talking about the building's requirements. If you're financing, the lender of course will check your DTI and your assets in order to qualify you for a specific loan product. With co-ops, every building has its own requirements when it comes to DTI and post-closing liquidity, and most of the time those requirements are much more strict than the bank will require in order to qualify you for a mortgage. So it doesn't matter if you have a signed contract with a seller and your loan is approved. You still have to satisfy that specific co-op's financial requirements. In terms of putting required amount of money down, having a DTI ratio below a certain percentage, and having enough liquid funds available after you close on your home in order to be able to buy in the building. The second pro would be there is no potential board rejection or interview process. Almost all condos have some sort of board package that you have to complete and submit. For some condo buildings, it can be a few forms to complete and sign, and for other condo buildings, it might feel like you're buying a co-op when you see the list of the required documents. But the key difference here is that the condo boards don't qualify the buyers and they cannot just reject your application. They have what's called a right of first refusal, which means the condo board has the right to buy the apartment with the same price and terms that is written in your contract. So if for some reason the board doesn't want that specific resale to happen, they have to buy the apartment themselves, which in practice almost never happens. Maybe there are a few known cases, but this process is mostly just a formality. I have a whole video talking about the condo board package and how the right of first refusal works. You can find the link of that video in the description below. So the bottom line is, when you submit your condo board package, you're not waiting to be approved or rejected. You're waiting for the condo board to waive its right of first refusal. Once you have the waiver, and if your financing, your mortgage is finalized, you can proceed to the closing table. The other pro is that pretty much anyone can help you with your purchase. If you're planning to buy an apartment with the help of your parents, a relative, or buy an apartment with your business partner, or receive the apartment as a gift, generally you don't need any permission from the building to do so. With co-ops, if you have a co-purchaser or any part of your down payment or the whole purchase price is a gift, or your parents are buying the apartment for you to live there, you have to look for apartments in the buildings where those cases are allowed. Some co-ops don't allow any gifts, guarantors, co-purchasers, or parents buying. The next pro is your occupancy type is also not limited. You can use your apartment as a primary residence, a vacation home, or a pied-à-terre, which means a part-time residence. On the other hand, if you're buying a co-op for part-time residence, you have to make sure that the building allows pied-à-terre. Otherwise, if that specific co-op building doesn't allow a pied-à-terre and you're looking to buy a part-time residence, your application won't be approved unless you claim that apartment as your primary residence. With condos, you don't have such limitation. Once you own the apartment, you can occupy it the way it works for you. The next on this list is that the condo owners generally have more freedom to rent out their apartments. Some condos might have a few minor restrictions, such as the minimum lease term should be 6 months or 1 year, or for example, the maximum lease term cannot be more than 2 years at a time, and things like that. But mostly in condos, you won't see those typical limitations that you see in co-ops, such as sublets allowed every 2 out of 4 or 5 years, or maximum 2 or 3 years sublet during the life of your ownership, and things like that. Some co-ops might not even allow any sublets, and co-ops most of the time have a lot of fees for shareholders who are subletting their units. The other pro is condos mostly take a lot quicker to close than co-ops. Co-ops can take longer because of the extra step of board approval and interview process. And on top of having an additional step, which is the board interview, co-op boards don't have any specific time limit that they have to review and respond to your board package. But according to most condo bylaws, the board has 30 days to either exercise its right of first refusal, which in reality almost never happens, or to issue a waiver. But one important note here that you have to be careful. Even though they cannot just reject your application, your board package has to be complete and correct. If after submitting your purchase application, the board notifies you that something is incorrect or missing, or they need an additional information from you, once you submit those, the 30-day period starts over. The next pro is, since condominium is a relatively newer type of ownership, a lot of condos are modern type of buildings with a lot of amenities, especially those new construction buildings made of glass with a typical floor-to-ceiling windows. And the last one I'd say, you have more freedom when it comes to any renovation or upgrading work you plan to do in your apartment. Of course, there's always going to be an alteration application that you have to complete and submit for an approval, but as long as your work doesn't cause any structural damage to the building or neighboring apartments, you should be fine. But co-ops can be much more strict and they can limit what kind of work you're allowed to do inside your apartment. Before we move on, if you're getting any valuable information from this video, it would help me a lot if you just like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can also comment below if you have any questions. Now let's talk about the things that can be considered a con when buying a condo apartment. The first one would be that condos are simply more expensive compared to the same type of apartment in a co-op building. That mostly has to do with the number of available inventory and the ownership structure. I also have 2 separate videos about how the ownership is structured for both condos and co-ops. You can watch them after you're done here. The next one on this list is not only the purchase price is high, but your closing costs are also higher compared to buying the same type of apartment in a co-op building. The biggest cost you're saving when buying a co-op with financing is the mortgage recording tax, since co-ops are not subject to mortgage recording tax in New York City. With condos, you're buying a real property, and the mortgage recording tax is part of your closing costs if you decide to finance your purchase. As an example, if you're buying an average 1-bedroom condo unit with a purchase price of $1.6 million, if you put down 20% and finance the remaining 80, which would be $1,280,000, your effective mortgage recording tax as of today would be 1.925% of the financed amount, which is $24,640. With condos, you will also need to pay a title insurance and a few minor recording fees associated with buying a real property. There can also be more competition with condos due to less supply and no strict financial requirements. And the fact that anyone can buy a condo, including LLCs, corporations, partnerships, and trusts. So if the price is right, you might be competing with not only people who want to buy a primary residence, but also with investors. Now let's discuss a few examples of situations where something can be considered as a pro for someone and a con for another one. Well, the fact that there is no potential board rejection or interview process means that the building has little to no control on who is buying in the building. So if you want to make sure that your neighbors are financially strong people who will be fine paying all the necessary costs to properly maintain the building's structural components and common areas, and you want to make sure that your neighbors won't cause any problems or inconveniences, well, in this case, co-ops can work better in your case, since the board has a complete control on every resale or sublet in the building. Or for someone who has a set budget, is looking to buy a primary residence and wants as much space as possible for their budget and doesn't care all other benefits that the condo ownership provides, it probably will not make sense to pay a premium price and get a condo, or for the same price to buy a smaller apartment than they could have bought if it was a co-op. On the other hand, paying a premium price will make sense for someone who needs all the benefits of condo ownership and they value those benefits more than having a little bit more space for the same price. The same concept when it comes to rental restriction. It's nice to know that you can rent out your apartment anytime you want, but if you're buying a primary residence and you don't have any plans of renting your unit, other owners in the building being able to do so can be a disadvantage to you, since your neighbors can be new tenants every year and some of them can be loud and cause inconveniences, and the building has little to no control on who can live there. Also, generally speaking, the wear and tear is considered to be a lot less in primarily owner-occupied buildings. So in this case, a condo without any rental restriction might not be the best option for you. But if you have some money to invest in real estate and you want an additional source of income, then yes, you need a condo building without any rental restrictions. Also, not having a potential risk of board rejection comes with a premium price. If you're someone who has strong financials, good credit, you've saved enough money to buy, and you're okay with waiting another, let's say, 30 days to get the board approval and close on your property, well, in this case, generally speaking, your money can buy you a lot bigger apartment in a co-op building and you'll have a less competition. But if you're someone who doesn't want to have a risk of board rejection, also the risk of your buyer being rejected by the board later when you decide to sell, well, in this case, yes, it will make sense to you to pay the premium price and buy a condo. We can go on and on with those examples, but my point is that there is no one-size-fits-all approach. This list of pros and cons can be different for every buyer, depending on what is the purpose of your purchase and what your priorities and your future goals are. That's it for today's video. If I was able to provide you any value, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment below. You can also use my email you see in the description of this video to reach out to me directly if you're looking to buy, sell, or rent here in New York City, or if you just have questions about New York City real estate. And lastly, if you want to know how much money you need to buy an apartment in New York City and what are the exact buyer closing costs, you can just click the video you see on your screen. Thanks for watching. Until next time.